It's one of these kinds of videos, huh? Okay. Sega was originally a hardware manufacturer that competed with Nintendo throughout the NES and SNES era, and eventually PlayStation and Xbox when they joined the competition too. And while it was a bold attempt to face off against the far more popular PlayStation brand and Xbox too, as well as Nintendo, it obviously didn't last, as Sega threw in the towel in 2001 with their last console, the Dreamcast, and stated that they will from this point forward develop games on their former competitor's platform instead of their own, acting as a third-party developer, much like every other third-party developer who doesn't make consoles. What a twisted fate they met right there. And still, to this day, Sega is just as prevalent in the gaming industry as they've always been, except, without the hardware. We still got our Sonic games, our Super Monkey Ball games, Samba de Amigo, our... Well, I don't know too much about Sega's other franchises, but hey, at least they still make games. And with Sega dropping out of the console wars, they managed to become more buddy-buddy with their former competitors now, especially Nintendo, even going as far as to feature multiple crossovers between Mario and Sonic competing in every Olympic event up until Tokyo 2020. Now, while one of the big reasons why Sega dropped out of the console wars was because of the constant failures of their systems after the Sega Genesis, it kinda got me thinking, what if one of the three current competitors these days dropped out of the console race because of constant failures of their systems? Or, more specifically, Nintendo. Now, I don't ever expect Nintendo, or frankly any of the other console holders on the market right now, to make the same mistakes Sega made from back in the day, nor do I want anything like this to even happen, but it's just interesting to imagine an alternate reality where, ever since the GameCube, let's say, it gets harder and harder for Nintendo to find success with their systems, like with the Wii and possibly ending things off with the Wii U before the Nintendo Switch even hits the scene. Now, thankfully, this never happened, but it's just interesting to see where things would be if Nintendo was no longer making new hardware anymore due to their own mistakes. But now, let's take a moment to think. Let's take a moment to imagine where the world would be if Nintendo was no longer developing new hardware and simply just games instead. Well, for one thing, we know that they develop games on PlayStation and Xbox, which means they're definitely not going to rake in as much money as they previously did when they were developing systems as well as games on top of that. But I think because Xbox and PlayStation systems are more technologically advanced than what you'd find with Nintendo's offerings, games would get a major overhaul. They'd probably look a lot better, they'd probably play a lot better. There might even be more to these games also, with the upgraded storage on these things allowing Nintendo's development teams to create bigger games that have much more to them, despite many Nintendo games having a lot to them already. And I don't think any of this would affect the actual games that Nintendo makes for the most part. I'm certain we're still gonna get our Zelda, Tears of the Kingdoms, and Mario Odysseys, and have them be just as critically acclaimed as they've always been. But this may affect how Nintendo appeals to the casuals, though. Which means, yes, games like 1-2 Switch would never exist. Doesn't mean I like the game, I'm just saying it would never see the light of day if this was the case. Tragic reality for us all, I'm sure. PlayStation and Xbox consoles don't really try to appeal to the casual gamers as much as, the games reflect that. They did previously have the Kinect and PlayStation Move, but those didn't really leave the same impact as the Wii and frankly wasn't as good. But if Nintendo was developing games on those consoles, then I don't think they'd be able to make casual Wii Sports-like games as much, or even stuff like Nintendo Labo or Ring Fit Adventure anymore, as PlayStation and Xbox controllers since the Kinect and Move onwards aren't really made for that kind of stuff unless Nintendo somehow makes their own motion control-based controllers like the Wii Remote or Joy-Cons, which, I don't know, it'd be kinda hard to paint a picture of something like that. And it would be incredibly disappointing if we lost all of these, because yes, these games aren't for everyone. But I and many other people very much enjoy these kinds of games every once in a while and feel that they should be a mainstay in Nintendo's game lineup going forward. Another thing I think Nintendo should do if they weren't making more hardware anymore is developing more mobile games. Ugh. Now, for those who don't know, I'm currently a part of the I don't really like Nintendo's mobile games that much club, and if they develop more mobile games if they became a third party, then this wouldn't really do much for me. Also doesn't help that a lot of their mobile efforts are just not that fun to begin with. I mean, back in my youth, Super Mario Run was a fun little time, but when I go back and play it now, it does nothing for me. This is a nothing game for me to play nowadays. Ask anyone else who was born in the year 2004 and you'll pretty much hear the same thing every time, trust me. But other mobile efforts like Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, Fire Emblem Heroes, and especially Mario Kart 2 are just not being for me at all. I don't think I would really care that much if more mobile games were made by Nintendo if they became a third-party developer. But even if I'm not, this just seems more like a Nintendo thing for them to do rather than avoid mobile entirely, regardless of whether I'd like it or not. And speaking of mobile, there's still the possibility of Nintendo just making portable systems if they abandon their home consoles altogether, as they essentially have a reputation for almost always being more successful than their home console counterparts. But I personally don't think this is likely if they became a third party because, third parties don't make game consoles, but I'm just saying it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if they continue with their portable escapades and abandon their home consoles while still developing for their former competitors. Not to mention, the idea of Nintendo not making new hardware sorta puts their legacy content or retro games in an unknown place. In the past, Nintendo always offered their retro games through the Virtual Console service, or at this current point in time, NSO. And while they could probably do a subscription service on Xbox or PlayStation, you do get a fairly decent value from Nintendo Switch Online, it kind of makes me think releasing their games via compilations would be a better idea. Not only because we have a billion services already, no, but also because it would kind of make these games more accessible, where instead of paying like a monthly or yearly fee, you could just pay one fee and have all these games available to you for the rest of your life. But that also makes you wonder, how would these compilations be organized? Because there's no way in hell Nintendo would offer us a $60 compilation with over 100 games from the NES, SNES, N64, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. No. And instead, maybe release compilations for a specific system, like an NES compilation featuring all the games that were available on the NES Online app on the Switch, and vice versa with all the other systems. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong and a subscription service is still probably the better option. I don't know. Still no. But yeah, that's essentially what I think would be the case if Nintendo wasn't making consoles anymore. And again, this is not something I want to have happen. I can't stress that enough. Because I think the gaming industry needs Nintendo as a console manufacturer. Without systems like the N64, 3D gaming wouldn't be what it is today. Without the Wii, motion controls wouldn't be as prevalent as it is, and hell, virtual reality probably wouldn't even exist without it. Even the NES, without that, video games probably wouldn't even exist in North America. And even now, Nintendo is still dominating the industry with the Switch with how it's a home console/handheld hybrid, and will most likely continue to dominate for years to come. Not to mention that they are usually the most unique with their systems. Each one has a unique thing going for it compared to the last, and that's already a big reason why Nintendo needs to stay in the console race altogether. Because on top of getting stellar games, we also got stellar systems too, and amazing memories that will last a lifetime. Which is exactly why Nintendo hates us all. And that's gonna wrap up today's video. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos on my channel where you'll find more videos like this one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.